Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to look at my Honda GL1100. I absolutely love this bike. I never was a Goldwing fan until I started researching the history of the Goldwing, and then I realized it's not just for obese people. You can actually have this as a normal sized person. This is a 4-cylinder version, and today in this video I'm going to show you all the things that I've done on this bike. This is the faired version. It's the interstate version. It's also very easily convertible to naked, as you can see here. Let's look around. So up front you have a very interesting size for the wheel. It's a 19-inch. It's the same as a lot of dual sports. The large, the GS, the Super Tenere, all have 19-inch front wheels. It uses conventional forks. The suspension and the brakes are not that good on it. It doesn't require a lot of brakes to stop, but if you're converting this into more of a sportier ride as I am, you need to upgrade the brakes. One of the things I do suggest is getting steel braided brake lines. 2 disc rotors up front. It's got 1 large caliper. It's really large, but it's got 2 on each side. The disc is not even ventilated. You could possibly upgrade it, even drill yourself for some cooling aspect, but the bike doesn't really brake that well. You might have to upgrade the entire thing. I have seen riders on GL1000s and 1100s that have converted the entire forks and they put in GSXR 1000 forks. These forks, the suspension on this bike is entirely unique. The front is working, the rear is not, but they use air adjustment. The next version, the GL1200, had an onboard compressor where you could change it on the fly, but on this one you have to add air when you want to adjust the settings. That is the antiquated version of dynamic suspension. So if you do want to make this bike much more sportier, unfortunately, the rake of the fork is more of a cruiser touring sort of rake, so you would have to like bring it down a little bit in order to become a little sportier. The headlight, mainly because the headlight on the interstate version is all included and you can't really remove it easily. So this one wasn't too expensive. It does have the integrated lights on there, and I have to, I guess, turn it on. There we go. It does have integrated blinkers onto the headlight. I don't know how visible it really is, but I do think it's a powerful light. Even during daytime, you see the light on the road. One of the things I really like about this bike is this engine. This one is the 4-cylinder boxer engine. It's 2 cylinders on each side. Very smooth engine, and it sounds great. This is such a good sounding engine, so smooth, and it's hard to believe that such an old bike is this incredibly smooth. Here's the carburetor up here. It is a very complex carburetor, and I got lucky that I didn't have to do anything. And because it's such an old bike, if you destroy this, for example, you're not going to be able to get this very easily. The parts for this bike cost more than the bike itself. I was lucky in order to find such a great shape bike, but everything on it is going to be expensive because you're going to have to find it in the used marketplace. Or the fuel lines have all been upgraded on this bike, but you see the engine sits so low. Like, this is the center of gravity is just so low. I'm such a big fan of low center of gravity bikes. Another really interesting thing about this bike and why it makes a great scrambler, it's got the crash bars already built in. So all of this is already built in, including the side racks. It's got so much protection. If you look here, this is your foot peg, and your feet are actually like right behind the cylinders, making this kind of warm. And down there, it's hard to see on video, but you do have an oil sight glass. Interesting thing about that sight glass is that you have a screw slot that has a little wiper. So if your oil gets dirty, or if your window gets dirty, you just move that aside and it kind of wipes it, kind of like a windshield wiper in a car. It's very intricate. I'm not sure it actually needs that. And that is your fill, your oil fill. It's got twin exhausts. These are still the stock exhausts and they do sound great. Panniers have definitely come a long way. This is the interstate version, so it came with all sorts of plastics, including the fairings. The way it opens, it's a top loading pannier. It's not a quick release. If you wanted to remove this pannier, you would have to get a wrench and get like bolts inside of there and then remove it and then disconnect the blinkers. So that's a great thing about this particular thing, is that the blinkers are integrated, and I do love the look of the blinkers on the saddle cases. I have the antenna, but obviously I removed the radio, but I just think it looks kind of cool. All the metal that supports this is really high quality. And here's something I really like about Honda Goldwings. Even the new Goldwings have this. The trunk, the top trunk, is one of the largest, and you can fit like 2 full-size helmets inside of here. So this one doesn't have any particular lights, but it does have a lot of carrying capacity, including this rack on the top that's made out of chrome, where you can put maybe a duffel bag or even a sleeping bag if you'll go camping. Behind this cover, I did install a lithium battery and completely removed the weight. But you know, the weight on this bike doesn't really bother me because everything is down low. The tank is right behind this. The battery is also here. The engine is like here, the heads are down here. Everything about this bike's weight is down low. And that's what you want on a bike that's easy to handle. This one does ride extremely well. It's a little bit hard to see, but on the right side, you do have a shaft drive that's easily accessible. Because of this bike uses air suspension to adjust the load. So if you are carrying a passenger, you can just add more air. It would be a stiffer ride. Unfortunately, the rear shocks were also air and they were completely gone. So when I got this bike, it was dangerously bad to ride it, so I had to replace the rear shocks, and I got some progressive springs and I installed them. This is where the gas tank is, but no, the gas tank is right underneath your seat. What you have here on the first GL Goldwings is this. You have a little compartment which normally comes with a tray. I don't have the tray. And the tray, you could just put stuff in there. But I love this because you have relays that are very accessible here. You also have the gas tank filler here. You have the coolant, you have your fuses, and you have your airbox. Very easy to maintain this bike. Everything is accessible. Even the fuses has a slot for hooking up your accessories, so you can hook it up directly to the ignition as opposed to the battery. If you look at my old videos where you see the big handlebars, I completely changed that. This is a much narrower handlebar, and it uses the larger diameter bars, which give it a little beefier kind of position. It's a much sportier position, but they are narrower. So that means that right now the clutch is extremely hard to pull. Front brake's a little bit hard to pull too, and the throttle kind of sticks. So you would have, if you go with this mod, you're going to have to change the clutch cable. You're going to change the throttle cables and all of that sort of stuff because they are too long and it's just not as easy to pull anymore. On the left side, you have the typical stuff, but you do have a very interesting signal. So normally on most bikes, you push in to cancel and then you have a left and right. On this one, you have to kind of find the middle for canceling. And then you have your low beam and high beam and horn. Here I have an on-off switch, and that switch is just to turn on the fan because the sensor did malfunction and the fan was not kicking in, it was overheating. So that's how I rectify it. I could replace the sensor, but this is something that a lot of GL1100 and 1000 owners do. Surprisingly enough, Honda decided to put a clutch cable clutch. I was expecting a hydraulic clutch for something like this, but Honda did not include that. On the right side, you have your throttle, and then you have a kill switch and a start button. And of course, your front brake and front master cylinder. So I did have to buy mirrors for this bike. I bought these. I actually was expecting larger ones, and I might still get them because these are more style than anything else. One of the things I really like about bikes is having large mirrors. You can see everything behind you. On this one, this is what the naked version would look like. You have your speed, and notice that the speed only goes up to 85 miles an hour. It's not a fast bike, but also all these speedometers from this period only had 85 miles an hour because the government mandated that motorcycles go only 85. This was during the 80s gas crisis, so they were trying to maintain speeds low, and unfortunately motorcycles had to suffer a little bit. On here you have your temperature gauge, and then your fuel gauge, and then here you have your tach, including you have a rear suspension air pressure light warning that goes on. This one does go on because I removed the rear shocks and replaced them. Then you have your turn signals, oil light, high beam, neutral, and your key. So Honda made everything easy to bolt back up if you wanted the interstate version. This is the cable for the radio. This large plug hooks up to the interstate fairing, and that hooks up all the lights, including all the blinkers. Everything gets hooked up, including the gauges. All right, let's start this thing and see how she sounds like. First, it's got 2 positions for the ignition. It's a little bit difficult to get it off the center stand because it's so heavy. And look, the kickstand, when you put it on that kickstand, it feels like it's just gonna topple over. Yeah, transmission is a little clunky sometimes, but that's kind of a rare thing. Today we're riding the Goldwing. We're gonna work out all that turkey off from Thanksgiving. It is Black Friday, and watch out for these Altimas. Man, this bike is just so fun to ride. Such a fun bike. I think the only thing I regret doing on this bike is the windscreen removal, because with the windscreen you could hear that engine really well. And by the way, I love this CarPlay thing for this bike. Maybe I should have put it on my SD because I'm doing Uber Eats, but you know what I do is, like, I store the phone in this little pocket and I charge it, and then I have this give me the options for doing Uber Eats. But I haven't done Uber Eats on this bike yet. So why should you even consider an old Goldwing like this? Man, look, I didn't really like Goldwings before because I thought they were just sofas on wheels. But there's something about riding this super smooth old engine that I really like. And you know, I'm also a cheapskate. When I see bikes for like $500 left and right on Facebook, I perk up. I go, whoa, why are they selling so cheap? And I think there's a lot of the consumer mentality that we have. We get used to just getting the newest and latest things, and we completely forget that these bikes are still completely 100% rideable. Think about all the guys that get the retro bikes, the modern retro bikes. To me, that just seems like such a weird thing, because you can get a bike like this and have a real retro bike. Isn't that better? Thing starts right up, never hesitates. I think I got lucky. This bike does need things, and I've been modifying it to what I want. But the thing is, when you have a cheap bike like this, you know, $500, $600, $700, you have enough money to modify the bike the way you want. All the guys that get the big GSs for, you know, $30,000. I know a lot of those guys. Some people actually ride them. The Starbucks, with the center of gravity being very low because of the boxer engine. But what are some of the things I don't like about it? Because as you know, I'm a big complainer. Well, the brakes are terrible. You should upgrade them to at least steel braided brake lines, and I do have to do that just because I changed the handlebar and I need shorter cables. So brakes are terrible. Another thing is that the MPGs, I guess back in the day, were terrible. This doesn't get very good miles per gallon at all. Something that's strange about a touring bike like this is that the gas tank is tiny, it's small, it's low to the ground, but for God's sakes, man, the range is just terrible. You'll do like 120, 30 miles and that's it. Of course, when you get an old bike like this, you're gonna get issues with parts. Parts for this are not horrible to get, but you do have to go through eBay if you ever need something. And it's also not a fast bike. If you look at the speedo, this is something that I didn't realize. It maxes out at 85, and that's because I guess in the 80s and 70s there was a gas shortage and they topped everything out at 80 something miles an hour, 85. I don't know if this bike is capable of more, but you know what, I'm okay with it being slow. It's very easy to get back up to the interstate version if you wanted, but for me, I like the naked Goldwings. And there's nothing more interesting than finding bikes like this that cost about $1,000 and they have such great engines. And also another very interesting thing is that the Guinness World Record for most miles accumulated on a motorcycle was a GL1100, like this one. So there's no issue with reliability and durability. Sure, parts are a little bit harder to find for old bikes, and you know, ever since I got a 1985 Honda Shadow, I've been lusting after old bikes that people just kind of throw away. And you can go online right now on the Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and you can find bikes like this all day long for about $1,000. Now you want to try to avoid anything that involves cleaning the carburetors because that's a very intricate procedure. And if there's crazy mechanical issues with the engine and transmission, of course you got to avoid those. But I kind of got lucky with this one. It's a perfectly good runner. And it goes to show you the quality of Honda motorcycles back in the day. I think Honda has gotten worse with the reliability. If you take some of their newer bikes, they're having more issues. So this bike is such a blast to ride. It's fun, it sounds great, and I think one of the things I regret is removing the fairing because you can really hear this bike roar behind that windscreen, but now because of the wind, you just can't hear it too well. I plan on putting maybe a small windscreen so I can get that back, but I think this bike looks great and I love the idea of touring on an old motorcycle. Well, I hope this was educational to you. If you did like this video, make sure you hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.